What's up, guys? Mike is staying here, and today I'm going to be bringing you another informational video, and this is going to be the first of a series that I'm coining Michael's Minutia, where I plan on explaining the nuances of the game that I think most people sort of only cover on the surface, or at least not like into that much detail. Also, since my last video was a lot to sit through, this time I'm going to be talking with a replay in the background. A disclaimer though, this is a game that was played in like mid-level 20s on a Smurf that I've been leveling up. I'm sorry. But most, if not all, the other players are also Smurfs too. So yeah, don't feel too bad for them. So today we're going to be talking about mindset, but more specifically on how to change a bad mindset. Now, first off, let me just preface this by saying that I'm a huge fucking internet rager. I was like one of those screaming Xbox Live kids on Call of Duty, and I used to rage a lot more, and I still occasionally do rage in League of Legends as well. I also went to a therapeutic boarding school for my senior year of high school, so I've had a lot of experience dealing with emotionally insecure teenagers, in addition to having had quite a bit of therapy to change my own thinking errors as well. So essentially what I'm saying is that I'm not just talking blindly out of my ass here when talking about changing mindsets, but you should still keep in mind that everything I say is purely my own opinion based on conclusions that I've drawn from my own observations. So, and I also don't claim to have, and I don't have any sort of professional degree or anything, so I'm in no way qualified to make evaluations of other people. However, I think I can still make a close enough guess that gives us something that we can work with, that helps us draw some conclusions to figure out a little more about this complexity that is the internet rager. Additionally, although this video is going to be directed mainly at people who think they might currently have a bad mindset, I think that even people who have good mindsets will be able to benefit from this video, since learning about the people that are difficult to deal with will help you deal with them in the future. So now finally onto the topic of what exactly is a bad mindset. Well, there are a lot of different variations of mindsets that could be considered bad, but essentially when we think of a bad mindset, the only thing that we think of is a mindset that inhibits our growth in the long run as a player in any way possible. And I'll start from like the most polar example of like a horrible mindset to like the more subtle examples as well, which is just my own personal style. I always like to do like polar examples and show like everything on the spectrum. So to think back to like Season 1 or Season 2, if any of you guys played during that time, the most clear example of someone who had like a bad mindset was someone who claimed to be an Elo Hell, which for any of you who didn't play at that time, Elo Hell is a concept that like it's an idea that, like, when you get in low enough elo, everyone around you is so bad that, like, they're impossible to carry. And not only that, because of the fact that there are 5 players in each game, and, like, you're only one person, then the claim was that these 4 players are, like, uncarryable. It's purely based on luck, hoping that you have fewer feeders. And this, it was very hard to believe for most people, especially because of the fact that all the high elo players are still able to get out of low elo, right? And because every single high elo player, they would essentially always say like elo hell doesn't exist, it's fake, like there's no such thing. Except a lot of the time they wouldn't actually explain why as much in depth, so that's what I'm going to try to do right now. So if we just think about like elo hell as a concept, the idea that like everyone around you is so bad that they're uncarryable, it does not make sense in League of Legends because of the fact that we have 4 teammates and 5 opponents in every single game, and you're the one common element in every single game. So if you really think that the pool of players from which like your teammates and opponents are being chosen from is so bad that like these players single-handedly lose their game all the time, then that means there's actually a higher chance for these quote-unquote like horrible, bad, feeding, flaming players to be on the opponent team, or the opposing team, rather than on your team, because 5 is greater than 4, right? 55% chance versus 44% chance. And then if we think about it conceptually as well, there are also like certain psychological defense mechanisms that now that we know that statistically elo hell doesn't make sense, then we can think, okay, psychologically, then why would elo hell ever come to be? So I think this boils down to a lot of like rationalization, selective memory, and externalization of blame. And to highlight this, I can use an example that like I usually talk about a lot with me and my mom when I was younger. So I also have a bad habit of externalizing blame, and I sort of blame my mom for this, which is like really ironic because I'm blaming her for it. But essentially, I think I picked it up from her where like a lot of the time, if something happened and it could be interpreted as her fault, except it like could also be interpreted as more of someone else's fault, then she would always blame that someone else. So for example, like if she's cooking some food and like I talk to her, I like ask her a question, and then she burns the food. Yeah, like sure, she just like ends up freaking out and saying like, oh, like you're the one who distracted me, and like because of that I fucking got distracted and burned my food, and like you never do any laundry, and that's why I'm so stressed and I burned this. And like, yeah, sure, we could say yes, I distracted her, and like because of that she burned the food. But like on another note, we could also say, okay, yes, I did distract her, but I thought that she could handle like talking and cooking at the same time. And she also did as well when she chose to engage in that conversation. Because if she knew that talking was like going to make it so that she was so distracted that she like makes a mistake, then she could just say, oh, I can't talk right now, I'm cooking, hold on, can you give me a second? But she also overestimated her ability to multitask, and then when she had this failure, she's like incapable of dealing with the failure because she thought that she should have been able to do it, and then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I burned this food, like I wouldn't burn food. Like a good mom doesn't burn food for no reason, whatever, you know. So that shows like sort of the idea I think behind when people externalize blame. It's essentially when people are self-conscious about their own performance in something, and they see a potential out where like they won't need to feel as bad about their own or themselves, then they'll usually go for that out. And in League of Legends, this is not beneficial for us because although yes, like self-esteem will help you, it does help you. It makes it so that you feel better about yourself, you think more highly of yourself, you are then more willing to put yourself out there and try to achieve like tasks later on because you like have the confidence that you'll be able to succeed. Because like if you don't have the self-confidence to like think that you'll succeed, then no one would ever want to try anything because it's just a waste of time, you'd fail at everything. However, although like self-esteem is good, we don't want to unjustly give ourselves self-esteem, because or at least if we're trying to improve. Because although it will make us feel good in the short term, then in the long term it makes it so that we are not as able to look at potential areas where we make mistakes. So a more relevant League example, I think, would be when someone gets ganked. If they die to a gank from like either the mid laner or the jungler, a lot of the time, the first thing is like, oh, why didn't you push your lane, or like, why didn't you ping Mia, or like, why don't you gank too, or like, some passive-aggressive comment of like, this jungler Lamau, or something like that. And like, anytime you say something like that, you're implicitly saying that like, it is someone else's fault. Like, if, for example, if you say that like, someone didn't ping Mia, you're saying that because they didn't ping Mia, that was the only reason that you died. If they had pinged Mia like it was their responsibility to do, then you would have seen it in time and then you would have been able to survive. However, like, although yes, like their Mia ping could have helped you, it's the same idea of like the cooking with my mom, you know, where like, yes, he could have pinged and like made you done your job for you and given you map awareness, but you could have also just looked at the map yourself, or you could have also just warded so that like you have vision of the area where you're going to get ganked from or something like that. However, like a lot of the time, especially in lower elo, I think people don't see the other options of like, okay, I needed to ward, or like, okay, I needed to just be looking at the map while CSing, because it's like almost unfathomable to them at that point. But that's like the biggest point that I'm trying to get to, which is that if you're not looking at the potential range of mistakes that you could be making, then it makes it so that you're not looking at all the options, and then in the long run, sometimes you're going to give yourself more credit than you deserve, and you're going to let one of your bad habits go on for much longer than it should. And of course, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be so polar. Like, people don't necessarily purely believe in elo hell and that, like, that's the only thing that's holding them back. There are, like, all different degrees along the spectrum where, like I said, some players are just like throw out a passive aggressive this jungler Lamau, or like on like an even less toxic mindset. Sometimes they like won't say anything and they might think that they like deserve they should have warded, but like thinking something and believing it are still two completely different things, because sometimes, like, if you don't sincerely believe it, then it will still be a self-limiting mindset in the long run. So, yeah. Because of this, I, a lot of the time, advocate for what I call, like, being completely internal in your locus of control. Well, like, I guess I'm not the only one who calls it. This is, like, an actual thing. Where, like, a locus of control is, essentially the idea that, like, it's how your inclination to attribute events and events to, like, your own actions or to actions outside of your control. So, for example, like, a completely external locus of control would be thinking that, like, everything in the world is luck, whereas a completely internal locus of control would be thinking that, like, you're God and, like, you can do everything, and, like, if you ever make a mistake, then it was because you didn't use your, like, all-knowing power or whatever to, like, do things correctly. Like, that's probably not the best example, but, like, hopefully that, like, sort of depicts, like, the difference between internal and external locuses of control. And, like I mentioned earlier, because in League of Legends, like, you are the only common element and all of your teammates are going to be random every single game, then we just choose to be purely internal in our locus of control and to only look at the things that we could have done better. So meaning that, like, if you lose a game, it's because you didn't carry hard enough. If you won a game, it's because you carried. Like, everything is your fault, regardless of whether you win or lose. And I think this is the first step to improving as a player, because if you think that things are out of your control, then again, you're not going to be looking for what you could be doing better. Now, on that note, in order to have an internal locus of control, it's sort of, I don't know, it's, you have to just accept the real, like, the situation that sometimes you are going to lose, and then if, like, you lose, then there's nothing you can do about it. Which, it's sort of contradictory to what I just said, because I said that, like, you should always be external in your locus of control. But sometimes there are situations where, like, there'll be nothing that you could have done, and you're going to lose those games. But just because of the nature of this game and matchmaking, because we need to have, like, 4 random teammates and 5 random opponents, then of course some games, like, they're just going to be left into chance. Like a lot of people say, because of the fact that this isn't 1v1, the elo system doesn't work exactly as it would in a game like chess or like StarCraft or something like that. So there are some games that are still unwinnable. However, unless we are playing perfectly, then we never look at a game as unwinnable. We always should look to the win condition that, to the 1 or 2 mistakes that could have potentially had made a difference in the outcome of the game. So, to give, and like, this is not that unrealistic to do, because if you just think about it, like, no matter what elo you're in, personally, you as a viewer, like, I don't know what you are, like, silver, bronze, plat, gold, diamond, challenger, like, there is someone who, in your situation, could have won the game that you lost. Because if you just take Apto or you take Faker, then, like, every single game that you lost in your past, like, 10 games of your match history, I guarantee they probably could have won at least, like, 8 to 9 of them, if not all 10 of them. So, because someone else can be doing it better, there's nothing different between you and that someone else. The only difference is, like, the small mistakes that you're making. And then the other thing is that, like, because I think that League of Legends isn't really that hard. I think that, like, getting to a diamond level isn't that difficult because, quite frankly, people play like butthole. Like, even when I got to my peak at Diamond 1, then I was making more mistakes than I could count on my hand every single game. Upwards of 5. Which is a big deal. Like, 5 mistakes per game is a lot of places, like, potential rooms for improvement. So, if I'm playing at a Diamond 1 level, and I'm not even playing anywhere close to optimally, then that means that, like, that essentially just like showed me that everyone under a challenger level now, in my opinion, is making tons and tons and tons of mistakes. So if you're not challenger yet, then your first step should always be fixing your own mistakes. Yeah, so let's see. How exactly would we look at these then? Well, we essentially look at like the biggest focal points of where the outcome of the game could have potentially gone differently. So, for example, like key critical team fights are like really obvious ones. Like if you misplay a Baron fight or a Dragon fight or like a fight over Inhib and you get caught out and because of that you guys lose the game, then it's like very clear that like you should have played that fight differently. But like even further than that, like I think every single death can be labeled as strictly a mistake and as strictly having a very big different impact on the game. Because every single time that you die, like you're losing at least about like a minute of time that like you could be on the map pressuring and farming. So yeah, like it really does snowball on itself every single time that you die. It like puts you behind that level curve of like what you needed to keep up with. So if you're dying more than one time per game, that means you're making way too many mistakes still. So like that's another really easy place to look at. But yeah, I'm not going to go over every single different scenario of like mistakes that you could be making. Essentially, all I'm trying to get at is that no one, like not a single one of you is playing perfectly right now. So if you're thinking that like, oh, this rule doesn't apply to you and like you're just struggling in your elo, like it's not true. Like everyone has something small they can work on. Let's see. Oh yeah, for example, like there are a lot of implicit mindset problems as well. Like some of my students will ask me questions like, how can I keep my team from getting caught 4v5 while I'm split pushing? Or like, how do I carry when my team's behind and like I just can't have an impact in team fights and like yada yada yada. Like anytime that you say a statement like this, it implies something in your thinking. So for example, if you say, how do I keep my team from getting caught 4v5, you're implying that like you think most of the games where you lose when you're split pushing, it's because your team's like getting caught while you're trying to split push. But I think you're probably, there's a very high chance that you're not making as high of an impact as you could be split pushing. So for example, like just looking at this game, like, sorry to jump back and forth, actually. Maybe I shouldn't talk about this replay at all. But, like, just briefly in this replay earlier, like, when I took that inner mid turret, then, like, they were spawning really soon. Some people would have considered it dangerous to stay. A lot of people definitely in ranked, if they're, like, afraid of that, then they would think, okay, I'd rather just play it safe and not take that turret. But playing it safe sometimes can be a mistake, too, you know? Because if, like, your teammates just lost something in one area, then you need to get something to compensate for it if you're not going to be helping them, and, like, your opponent teammate is top lane is helping them. And then in that specific scenario, because I saw that, like, 3 people were dead, and then I saw where, like, some people were on the map, then I knew that they wouldn't be able to get to me in time. Except, if people are thinking about, like, their teammates dying instead of thinking about where they could be pushing most effectively, then, again, like, you're just not going to be able to see those mistakes. Yeah, so, I don't know. I guess I thought that yeah, again, so just like with my last informational video, I had the beginning part of it planned out better than the middle or end part of it. So I thought that the topics would sort of converge a little bit more, but I'm not really sure how I want to end this video. But essentially, just to summarize, I'm just trying to say that, like, no matter who you are or what elo you're at, there is something that you could be doing differently to win your games, because you're playing very far from perfectly, and someone who's playing perfectly would be able to win in your scenario. So if you want to actually improve and gain elo, the first step is to recognize that this is happening before you can even look at what mistakes you're making and where you could potentially be improving. So yeah, that's it for this video. Sorry for the somewhat rambling nature of it, and I hope you enjoyed your time. Thanks for watching.